I started learning Japanese around 4 years ago. I remember it was a warm spring afternoon, and I would always go out and walk my dog, like early in the morning, and I would come back and I'd write down all the words that I learned in Japanese. And at that time, I remember I primarily used Duolingo. If you've had any experience learning languages at all, on your own or at school, you've probably heard of it and you might have even used it. And I think a lot of people have this idea that, especially when they begin learning a language, that there must be some ultimate method to go about it. Like the most efficient way to do this. And they think, well, I have to discover that. And I think for a large part of, especially the first year that I was learning Japanese, I was in that very position. Because I had started learning Japanese using Duolingo, I realized at one point that Duolingo on its own wasn't enough to help me reach the level of Japanese that I wanted to be able to speak. So over this period, I began looking for all sorts of different ways to attain a high level of fluency in Japanese. And one of the people that I stumbled across on YouTube was someone named Matt vs. Japan. Now, there was this way of learning Japanese called AJAT, short for All Japanese All the Time. It more or less consisted of constantly immersing yourself in Japanese content, stuff like TV shows, anime, movies, and all sorts of other stuff, in the hopes that you would gradually pick up the language just like a child or a baby does when it's learning its mother tongue. Matt vs. Japan was an American that claimed he had learned Japanese to a very high level of fluency almost entirely through the use of the AJAT method. A problem that a lot of people who are trying to learn language run into is it's difficult to know who to take advice from. On this issue, Matt vs. Japan recommended that if the person you're taking advice from has the level of proficiency that you would like to achieve, then it's a good idea to take their advice on how they got to that position when you are attempting to do the same. The first time I heard that advice, it really left an impression on me because I thought that this applied very well not only to language learning, but to life as a whole. After all, if you expand that to other situations in life, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to take advice on money from somebody who doesn't have any money, or advice on girls on someone who's not particularly good with girls himself. This is a sentiment I've heard other people express as well, not only Matt vs. Japan, but truthfully I think it's one of the most important pieces of advice you could give someone. A while back I had a conversation with one of my friends who is taking a business course at college, and he was telling me how it does make a lot of sense to be taking business advice from people who had actually failed to start their own business. The author of the personal finance book Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, has talked about this himself on multiple occasions, giving the example of an accounting teacher who's never actually been an accountant himself. Kiyosaki calls people like these fake teachers, people who are willing to educate others on a subject they themselves are not knowledgeable in. I think it's especially relevant in the modern day to heed this advice because we're being bombarded by so much data every day, and it's important to be able to pass that which can help us and is useful and that which is actually actively causing a detriment. There are a lot of people online that claim they have all the answers, that their way of doing things is the perfect way to go about it. But I think if we only take advice from people who have accomplished something of merit, something that we want to imitate, things would just turn out a lot better. The truth is that if somebody lives a good life and has many of the things that you would like to one day have yourself, then I doubt that much could go wrong if you listen to this person's advice. On the opposite end, if somebody doesn't have that which you want to achieve yourself, and in fact has negative attributes, then it's a pretty reasonable thing not to listen to what that person has to say. After all, it's up to every person to remain a critical thinker and keep an open mind, and I think that's the best thing you can do when taking any advice.